Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shavuot, Yizkor sermon with Rabbi Adam Kligfeld.
Very close on the solar calendar and almost exactly on the lunar calendar, I began Shiva 6 months ago. So I'm halfway through this journey, at least the first part of this intense journey of grief that I've been with many of you on as a rabbi, counselor, pastor, first time as a mourner. And I've been thinking a lot back to Shiva and what I experienced in those very intense and heady days. And talking a lot about it with my sister as we process it, because processing helps, talking helps. It doesn't undo, but it extracts some of the muck and turns it into something material that you can work with. And we noticed that there were two epiphanies that came to us during Shiva, a little of which we understood in real time, some of which only in retrospect. Two themes. And they're sort of opposites and twins at the same time. And one of them is more obvious than the other. The more obvious of the awarenesses that came to us during Shiva is that, of course, life is very short. It is fleeting. As the language of Yamim Noraim tell us in the Unatana Tokef, Kachalom Ya'uf. It flies away like a dream. Psalm 90, Yemei Shnotenu Bahem Shivim. The years of our lives are going to be about 70. Back then, that was a lot of years. Be'im Bigvurot Shmonim Shana. If we have a certain amount of vigor, perhaps 80. V'robam Amal V'aven. Most of them are filled in travail and stress. Ki gaz chish v'na'ufa. And then it just, poof, disappears and flies away. There was a certain moment when Shiva was over that I heard myself say the following thing to my sister. I know that Abba was failing, and I remember the days that we knew that the end was coming, and remember the vidui, and we were by his bedside, and we said goodbye, and we held him, and we stroked him, and he took his last breath, and we ripped our clothing, and Baruch Dayan Amet, and we arranged the funeral, and we prepared the eulogy, and we buried him, and we said Shiva. I get that, but it's over? It's over, and it's not coming back? It was a weird, super obvious realization that just smacked me as we had succeeded in getting through that first intense week of grief. And how overwhelming and clear that realization is after someone dies. I heard myself think, shouldn't I have known that so clearly before he took his last breath? Life is very short. But the other epiphany that we had, which again is almost the opposite, but they're related, is that life is long. When I started preparing my father's eulogy, the overwhelm of trying to combine tens, hundreds of thousands of interactions and wisdoms and moments into 1,500 words at most. It was an awareness of how impossible it is to encapsulate someone's life in a eulogy, and how much he had lived, and how many things there were, and how many stories there were to tell. My sister gave herself and me and my mother a gift at some point during the Shiva, bought us each digital frames, and started to catalog all the pictures of my father throughout the generations. And it was kind of a gift that kept on giving, because every time I'd come into the kitchen and it's motion censored, it would respond to my being there, which in it itself was nice. My father would appear on the screen, and new pictures that I hadn't seen because my sister was figuring out which pictures to scan in her home in Massachusetts and put it on there. And there were so many. And there were so many moments. Moments that I had forgotten. Moments that seemed small in the moment, but no moment is small. Life is long. And even that came to us with a certain bittersweet ache, because it was a reminder of all of the chances that we did have to say things that we wanted to say. We said a lot of them, but not all of them. So many chances, because life is short and life is long. And those awarenesses point us slightly in a different direction, particularly in terms of what's at stake if we fail to recognize that. If we don't recognize that life is short, we're going to miss a lot of things. We're going to refrain from too many opportunities because we're going to delude ourselves to thinking that they are certain to come back. We're going to take moments and days and people and relationships for granted. If we don't realize that life is short, we're going to waste this precious gift, and we're going to stand at Yizkor with regret and longing. But if we don't recognize that life is long, there are other things at stake. We're going to suffer from a lack of wonder, a wonder that is due. Lives, even lives that have been cut way too short, were often filled with marvel and love and tenderness and generosity. And if we don't recognize that life is long, we're going to ignore and be blind to this precious gift. We're going to stand at Yizkor, alert to life's length and wonder for a few moments, and then go back to wasting time as soon as we leave the service. The overwhelming ache of being alive. Every poet, every philosopher, and every playwright has gone there on some level. I returned to a play this week that I hadn't thought much about and hadn't really read the words of since 7th grade. In Miss Fasano's class at Hopkins Grammar School, when we read Our Town. How many of you were assigned Our Town in your education? Not that many. Wow. Connecticut, boy. They knew what they were doing. We read Our Town line by line, our 7th grade class. I can't figure out in retrospect how long it took, but it was a few pages a day, and we got from the beginning to the end. And I have not read it since. And yet somehow it packed such a wallop back then that the narrative and the pathos of it are deep in my kishkas. I was having a conversation with a member of Beth this week, a member of the community who's in grief herself. And our conversation brought me back to the final scene of Our Town and of Emily, the heroine, who is temporarily resurrected from the grave. She has this ethereal reunion with other members of Grover's Corners, including her mother-in-law. And that scene at the end of the play kind of is evocative of the end of the Harry Potter series. Spoiler alert if you haven't finished book 7 yet. There are 10 Yizkor sermons in Emily's last soliloquy. Just a few snippets. She says, "But just for a moment, now that we're all together, Mama, just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another." It's Thorsten Wilder putting in the mouth of a deceased young girl the reminder that we have to live the moment now, because you will wish you could do more of it when it is over. She writes, I can't go on. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize all that was going on in life, and we never noticed. Take me back up the hill to my grave. She, a dead young girl, has grief over the craziness of how often We're blind to this when we're above ground, reminding her and every other reader that life is short. I was blind, she says. I was deaf. I didn't see it. I didn't listen. And then, as we're getting very close to the last few lines of the play, she says, but first, wait, one more look. Goodbye, goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners. Mama and Papa, goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers and food and coffee and new iron dresses and hot baths and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Which I hear as Emily's way of saying, and life is long and filled with so many things that should make us grateful beyond words for being here. The beauty that is in the simple and the mundane and the everyday. The beauty actually embedded within the cliche of the rising sun and the presence of family and a tenderly offered hug. We will all say goodbye to it someday. What do we say to it today? And finally, she says at the end, Emily, do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. A rhetorical question to which the resounding answer is no. It is impossible every minute. But some minutes, like those spent in the reverie of Yizkor, are meant to open our eyes and our hearts, realize it now, realize it today, and maybe even tomorrow. That scene with Emily at the end of the play is reminiscent of a powerful narrative, a powerful moment in the Torah, in the book of Breshit. It's a moment about being alert and awake and not sleepwalking through life and through relationship, either with one another or with God. It happens when Yaakov wakes up from his dream in Parshat Vayetze and has a fabulous recognition. Vayikatz mishnato, he got up from his sleep, Vayomer, and he said, Achein, behold, Yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh, God is in this place. And then, so bittersweetly, Va'anochi lo yadati, I didn't know. The simple pshat of that verse is that God is everywhere and anytime. You have to look. Look and you will find, you will sense, you will experience. God will not come to one who has no frame for God. It's embedded in our sacred tradition. God will not come to one who has no frame for God. And I would add, neither will love. I think that's the simple meaning of the verse. But I want to share an interpretation of the verse by the Kutzker Rebbe, the great Hasidic master from the town of Kutsk. First, he quotes Rashi. It's a very Hasidic thing to do. Quote the classic medieval commentator and then expand upon it or ask a question on it. Do to the commentator what the commentator did to the Torah. Rashi says in this verse that what Jacob is saying is, if I had known that God was here, I wouldn't have fallen asleep in such a holy place. I wouldn't have done the indignity of taking a nap in a place of sanctity. And the Kutzker says to Rashi, who lived 800 years before, but wait, that doesn't really make sense as putting into Yaakov's consciousness. Because the sleep that he did have brought him to the dream. And the dream is what brought him to the revelation. Had he not slept, he never would have known. So how can he really wish that he hadn't fallen asleep? What's he actually regretting? Is he regretting finding out that God was there? The only way he could have found out was having slept. He points out a puzzle in Rashi's comment. And this is the Kutzker's marvelous answer. This is my translation of his Hebrew. He meaning Jacob, didn't want to achieve this apex as a gift from heaven by means of a dream. He wished he had been awake for it. Not that he hadn't slept and had it revealed to him. He wished he'd been awake for it. He wished he had had to effort for it, achieve it through his own curiosity and motivation. He wished he learned of God not as a bequest from above while asleep, but because he was looking for God, awake. How sweet but fleeting and ultimately inconsequential is a revelation you have in a dream. It's bursting clear for a moment and then it's gone. I hear the Kutzker Rebbe saying of Jacob and to us, don't sleep through this life. And don't sleep through this God. And don't sleep through this love. And don't sleep through this moment. Wake up. Our town ends on a down note, or at least a very realistic one, about how relentlessly we human beings keep stubbing our toe on this, keep stumbling when we know we should stand straight, keep slumbering when we know we should be awake. These are the last lines of the play, aside for what the stage director says at the end. Mother Gibbs? Yes, Emily? They don't understand, do they? She's asking a question that is so clear from the grave. No, dear. They don't understand. That's the end. Aside from the stage manager's valedictory, what is clear, so clear to that consciousness that is ascribed to those who have died, as if they had it, remains clouded in our living minds. It's the fate of us all on some level to continue to not know it now, only to know it all too well then. Yizkor is meant to punctuate that. Our liturgy is meant to demolish that. The psalm that we say in a Beit Avel, a house of mourning, if you've been in shivas with me, you've heard me say something like this, is not to offer comfort. It is not a comforting psalm. It is a psalm to offer a trumpet in our eardrums, to wake up to what has happened, what is happening, and how we ought to respond to the fleeting and the wondrous nature of life. Life is short. Life is long. Wake up.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.